Okay.
So, dear colleagues, I'm very happy to see all of us here today. So we are going to have a second presentation in the framework of our scientific seminar that we are holding this summer. So this is the seminar on theoretical and methodological innovations in network analysis. And we invite so the idea is that we invite leading researchers and some practitioners who are doing some interesting stuff in network analysis, and some things that we can see as innovations in network analysis, something that we still don't really know much about. So we are very happy that we have quite a tough schedule. And so for those of you who haven't heard about all the presentations, I advise you just to go to our website and to find the description of this seminar and just to pick up the presentations that you are interested in. We already had our first seminar with Professor Vladimir Batagel, and today we are happy to listen to our scientific advisor, professor of the University of Ljubljana, and our scientific advisor of our laboratory, Anuška Ferligoj, with the presentation on the topic clustering of attribute data and network data. So Anuška, please.
Thank you very much, Dasha. So I will talk about clustering of attribute, which means normal data that we have in statistics, units and variables, and network data. The collaborator on this topic is still, because we are still doing these things, Vladimir Batagel. You saw him the last time. So this is the outline. I will make an introduction. I will say about general clustering problem first, and then I will go to clustering of attribute data and network data, and then I will show an application, and I will finish with some conclusions and also open problems. So what do I mean with network data and with attribute data and network data? Here I have 10 units. So the attribute data means that for these 10 units, each unit is one row here. I have, for example, 5 variables. So each column is a variable, right? So these are the attribute data, or we can also say the usual statistical data or variables. And here we have network data. And we see that this network is directed, the idea here is, how can I cluster units according to both types of data? So that's the problem that we are going to talk about. Clustering of attribute data and network data belongs to the topic of network clustering. This network clustering includes also, besides this clustering of attribute and network data, also block modeling, also community detection, and many other approaches like graph theory approaches and so on. We were studying this network clustering topic in our latest book, Dorian Batagel Ferligoj, published 3 years ago. We were actually editors of this book, and there these several possible topics on clustering network data is nicely described. Of course, network clustering is quite an important topic in social network analysis, where mostly we talk about block modeling, but this will be a little bit different approach. So most of the problems, clustering problems, can be formulated as an optimizational problem. And this optimizational problem is defined by the set of feasible clusterings and a selected criterion function. So we can define, according to the problem, the set of feasible clusterings, and also according to the problem, we can select also an appropriate criterion function. So this approach, this optimizational approach to clustering, can be applied to quite a variety of clustering problems. Why? Because it is possible to adapt to a concrete clustering problem, the problem that I have to solve, with an appropriate specification of the criterion function and the set of feasible clusterings. So we can adapt to the concrete clustering problem by defining these two things. What is the set of feasible clusterings and which criterion function to select to be as close to the solving of a concrete clustering problem. Clustering of attribute data and network data can be very nicely treated by this optimizational approach. Now, let us first see what is this optimizational approach to clustering problem. Cluster analysis is also known as classification, or in biology, they are talking about taxonomy. These are synonyms of cluster analysis, classification, taxonomy. So if you are looking for the literature, you have to look of all these three notions to get the literature on cluster analysis. So cluster analysis deals with the following problem. So we have a set of units denoted by U, and for this set, we would like to determine subsets that are called clusters. These are C, which are homogeneous and as possible, as much as possible, well separated according to the measured variables. Here, usually we can also graphically present these units according to the measured variables in such a way that each variable is a dimension in a space. And then, for instance, if there are only two variables, then units are represented as a scattergram. So units are presented in this two-dimensional space as points in this space. But if you have a lot of variables, this means that I have m, if I have m variables, m-dimensional space. And these units are in this m-dimensional space, which usually we cannot visually see what's going on there. And these units can be nicely structured, which means that we have some clusters of units very close to each other and well separated to clusters. That would be a very nice structure of units. But usually these clusters are overlapping and so on, so it is not so very easy to see the clustering that exists in this m-dimensional space. Okay, the set of clusters forms a clustering. This will be this bold C. Okay, and the clustering as an optimizational problem is this one. We have to determine the clustering C star, for which the criterion function P has the minimum value, has the smallest value as possible. So that sometimes we are searching for the maximum. But the usually clustering criterion functions are such that we are looking for the minimum value of a cluster. If we are searching across all possible clusterings of the set of feasible clustering, okay? So C is a clustering, U is the set of units, this phi here is the set of feasible clusterings. These are all possible clusterings that in which we are looking for the best clustering, right? For example, if we are searching for a clustering with two clusters, so all possible clusterings into two clusters are defining the feasible clusterings, right? So it's a kind of, so we have a kind of a constraint to determine which clusterings are meaningful in my case, right? So this is feasibility, so that I am defining, I'm searching for, I'm searching a clustering in that set of possible clusterings that are feasible, that are the ones that I'm searching for, right? And P is the criterion function, so that for each clustering, we obtain from the set of feasible clustering a real number, right? And we are looking for that clustering that has the minimum value of this criterion function P. So there are many criterion functions also that we can look for. But I will say a little bit more about that later. Now, first, let us speak about clustering. There are many types of clustering. For example, partition, hierarchy. I will define these two, but also pyramid. It can be fuzzy clustering. It can be overlapping clusters, and so on. So there are many different definitions of clustering. And of course, quite complex definitions and difficult to handle them. The most frequently used clusterings are partitions and hierarchies. What is partition? So a clustering is a set of clusters, for instance, K clusters, and this set of clusters is a partition if these two things have to be satisfied. The union of all these K clusters is the set of units, U, the whole set of units U, right? And intersection of each pair of clusters is an empty set. So they cannot overlap. Clusters are not overlapping, and the union of all these clusters is the whole set of units. So it covers, all clusters are covering the whole set of units. Okay, this is partition. A clustering is a hierarchy if for each pair of units it holds. So we said before that is intersection of two clusters is an empty set, right? Here in hierarchy, it can be, the intersection can be the first set or the second set, or it can be an empty set, right? So it's a release of the previous requirement, right? But we will see hierarchies very soon. Okay. Now the criterion function. So criterion function has to reflect the clustering problem. And usually it is defined indirectly. Indirectly means that first we calculate an appropriate similarity or dissimilarity measure between pairs of units. So for each pair of unit, we defined a kind of a real number, you know. For example, one possibility is Euclidean distance, but there are many others. It can be also correlation coefficient or whatsoever. So indirectly, so first dissimilarity measure is defined, and then on these dissimilarities, the criterion function is defined, right? Or it can be defined directly, so that you measure this criterion function not through the dissimilarity measure, but directly according to the problem, right? Absolutely the most used criterion function for the clustering problem is Ward criterion function. What is Ward criterion function? Let us see it. It's good to know. So first, let's go first to each cluster. So for the cluster C, we define the dissimilarity between each unit and the center of that cluster. And for instance, if we think about the Euclidean distance or squared Euclidean distance, actually in this case, in Ward criterion function, it is squared Euclidean distance between a unit in a cluster and the center of that cluster. And then we go through all units in this cluster C and sum up this. And then we sum up also across different clusters in the cluster. Okay, so this D is the squared Euclidean distance. This TC is the center of the cluster. What is the center of the cluster? So if we take units, all units of the cluster C, then the center is defined as average on these units of the cluster C of the first variable, of the second variable, of the M variable, right? So these are averages of each variable of the units of the cluster C. Okay, of course, we assume here that we have interval or ratio scale of these variables U. Okay, U is a variable, right? If anyone has any question or whatsoever, just interrupt me, right? Okay. So, so if the set of feasible clusterings is non-empty and finite, then always a solution of the clustering problem exists. But the problem is when the number of units is very large. You know, in this case, the set of feasible clusterings is really very large, and then it is difficult to find an optimal solution. Actually, in general, it is proved that most of the clustering problems are NP hard. So it is believed that you cannot exactly find an optimal solution. Okay, and therefore we are using different heuristical algorithms to find as good as possible a solution of the clustering problem. And actually, it is also proved what kind of heuristics is included in each algorithm, and then we can somehow tackle the problem of these heuristics so that we come as close as possible to the global optima. The most important algorithms are hierarchical one. It is agglomerative or divisive or adding and so on. Usually we are using the agglomerative hierarchical algorithm, or it can be local optimization. For example, relocation procedure that we are using in block modeling a lot. It can be k-means, which is a local optimization approach, actually. K-means is also known as leader method or dynamic clusters method. You know, so, you know, this clustering field was developed in many different disciplines, and they didn't know between each other. So therefore, a kind of different terminology was used for the same things. But later, Sokal and Smith wrote a kind of Bible book of cluster analysis in 60s, actually. And then somehow a temptation to make a kind of a joint terminology of the field was developed. And also then there are some graph theoretical methods that can be used for solving clustering problems. Now, as I will use agglomerative hierarchical adapted, actually, agglomerative hierarchical later. Let us just quickly go through what is agglomerative hierarchical algorithm. It usually assumes that all relevant information for the units is somehow summarized by a symmetric pairwise dissimilarity matrix. For example, if we have units and variables, means attribute data, usually we can calculate Euclidean distances between each pair of units, and that would be the dissimilarity matrix. But if we have, for instance, network data, means that we are looking for we would use the agglomerative hierarchical algorithm for the network data, which means a kind of block modeling problem. Then we can calculate a kind of Euclidean distance between each unit according to this network data. And again, we can define in this specific way this the dissimilarity matrix between units. This is n by n. If we have n units, this is a matrix n by n, right? So we start in this hierarchical algorithm with this matrix D, which tell us how close is each pair of units. So we begin that each unit is a cluster because of terminology, so that we have only clusters. And then we repeat, while there exist at least two clusters, determine the nearest pair of clusters. So in this D, we are looking for the smallest dissimilarity, and that would be the nearest pair of clusters. For example, this is CP and CQ. Then in the next stage, we fuse these two clusters to form a new cluster CR. And then we replace the CP, these two clusters, CP and CQ, by the cluster CR. Okay? So that means that this dissimilarity matrix will be one dimension less, because we will not have two clusters here, but only one, because we will fuse these two clusters to CR. So, and in this case, because we will fuse these two clusters to a new cluster, we have to determine the dissimilarities between this fused cluster to all other clusters. What is the dissimilarity between this new cluster and all other clusters? This is the situation. These Ci and J are the closest, for example, and here we have Ck, the third cluster. So we fuse these two ones because this D is the smallest, right? So this will be only one cluster, and this will be another cluster. So we have these three dissimilarities, but out of these three dissimilarities, we have to determine one dissimilarity. The dissimilarity between this joint cluster and Ck. What can we do? We can take the minimum value of these two, the maximum value of these two, the average of these two. Yes, Ilya? Okay. Or we can calculate here a center and here a center, and then we can calculate, for example, the dissimilarity between these two centers. For example, this is the minimum method. We take the minimum of these two, the maximum of these two, the average of these two, and the vast method, which is the most used method, means that we calculate the center of the fused cluster and the center of the third cluster, for example, TK, take the square of the similarity between these two clusters, and then we normalize this with the number of units in each of these clusters, right? So these are, and there are many other methods, you know, really a lot of different methods, but these are the most commonly used methods. And then there is a lot of knowledge the developments, you know, what kind of structure each of these methods is searching for, and so on. Another thing is that the result of this hierarchical algorithm can be presented by a tree or a dendrogram, because in each stage we fuse two clusters, right? And then in the next one, we fuse another two clusters, and so on. And we end with fusing all units into one cluster. You will see later these dendrograms, how they look like. Okay, and one problem is, for example, which dendrogram is nicely seen, so that you don't have, for instance, the jump of the dendrogram would go down, and so this is called a monotonicity of the algorithm. And then we are asking which of these methods will always give us a monotonic tree, so that it goes up, right? And for example, this average method, this McQueedy method, does not guarantee the monotonic tree, and so on and so on. It's a huge field, the field of cluster analysis. Okay, I was telling before, actually, what are the benefits of the optimization approach. I was saying that it offers the possibility to adapt to a concrete clustering problem by choosing the criterion function and by choosing or specification of the set of feasible clusterings. So we have two dimensions where we can go as close as possible to the problem that we are going to solve. Classical clustering deals with clustering of attribute data or with variables, right? We have only units and variables. This is the classical clustering problem. Then we have block modeling. Block modeling is searching for a clustering according to the network data only, right? And here we have to properly define the criterion function. And we were studying this quite a lot from 1990 on, and in this book from 2005, there is the whole story of our developments is given, and there we can see that we can define this criterion function directly, indirectly, and in many different ways. And then we have our topic, today's topic, which is clustering of attribute data and network data. And here the criterion function is used for considering the attribute data. For example, with var criterion function. So the criterion function is the one that is using the attribute data, and network data are properly defined, defining the set of feasible clustering. Okay, so attribute data are treated by a criterion function, and network data are defining appropriately the set of feasible clusterings. You see? So each of these two things is used for each of the types of data. Now, let us go to this clustering of attribute and network data. So suppose that units U are described by attribute data variables, and these units are related by a binary, in our case, binary relation, which determine the network data, okay? So as we know how to choose, or we were talking about Barth criterion function for attribute data, it is much more interesting how the network data can be incorporated, right, in the definition of the set of feasible clusterings. Okay. So so here we assume that we have binary network, right? In our case here, still open how to use all this thing, but I will say a little bit more that it's possible to use also for the somehow value. But now we are constraining ourselves to binary networks. And this binary network is defined by relation R. This relation imposes constraints on the set of feasible clusterings. In what sense? The set of feasible clusterings is defined by the clustering. This C bolt is a clustering. And now let us see how this clustering is defined here. So for each cluster from this clustering here, each cluster induces a subnetwork in the network UR, this is my network, of the required type of connectedness. This means that in each cluster of a clustering, a specific type of connectedness is required, right? So I have to define which type of connectedness is interesting for me, for my clustering problem, okay? And I am defining then the clustering in such a way that in the cluster, that type of connectedness has to be there, right? I hope it is understood. So in each cluster, a specific type of connectedness should be there, according to this relation, of course. Let us go to be a little bit more concrete. There are different types of sets of feasible clusterings. Here I have 5 different types, but probably much more can be defined. Already in '83, we defined, Vlado and me, these types of sets of feasible clusterings. So the first one is phi1, and we have to remember a little bit. This phi1 means that in each cluster, the units should be weakly connected. Weakly connected, because we have directed network here, okay? We assume that we have directed binary network. So each cluster has to have units in each cluster of this phi1 should be weakly connected according to the relation R. Phi2, again, weakly connected, but in each cluster contains exactly one strong center. So the units overall in the cluster are weakly connected, but there exists one, and we call it center, which is strongly connected, and only one such strongly connected center. So which means in each cluster, there is a strongly connected center, and all others units are connected to this center. A kind of core periphery structure, right? Then we have this phi 3, that the units inside the cluster are strongly connected. Okay, phi 4, that there is a click, so that all units are connected to each other. This phi 5 is interesting, that in the cluster exists a trial containing all the units of the cluster. What is a trial? It's a walk where all arcs are distinct. So all units in this cluster, there exists a walk that goes through all units, and all arcs are distinct. So this is a trial. So in each cluster, there has to be a trial, right? So these are 5 different possibilities of a type of clusterings, but of course there are more, but we studied these 5 ones. For instance, click means, that, this is undirected network, that means symmetric network, and each pair of units is connected, right? So this is click. Strongly connected units means that you can, according to the arcs, you can come from each unit to each other unit. For example, I can come to 1 to 2, for example, like this and like this, right? I can come from 2 to 1, but not from 1 to 2 by this arc, but I can go through 4, right? And so on. So this would be strongly connected units. Here is weakly connected units. So you cannot come from each unit to another unit according to the arcs, direction of the arcs. But if you don't take into account directions, then you can come to from each unit to each other unit, not taking into account the direction. And here we have this weakly connected unit with a center. So these 3 units, 1 to 4, this is a center, they are strongly connected, and all other units are connected to the center, right? So this would be that one. There are some very interesting properties of this set of visible clusterings. But let us first, again, so 1 is weakly, 3 is strongly, 2 is weakly with a center, 4 is click, and 5 is trial, okay? Now, the set phi4, what is that phi4? Click, right? So is a subset, so it's the smallest set, right, of the phi3, which is strongly connected, is a subset of that with a center, and this is a subset of the one which is weakly connected. So this is the largest, the most clusterings in this set of visible clustering, and this is the smallest, which is click. We know that click is a stringent requirement. On the other side, this click is a subset of this trial stuff, right? And this is a subset of phi2. You remember, weakly connected with strongly center, with strong, yeah, with that center, right? So these 2 things are there. If the relation is symmetric, then if it is weakly or strongly connected, it doesn't matter. So these 2 feasible sets of units in this case would be the same. So we say simply connected, right? If the relation is symmetric. There is another very interesting, let us say, finding or the result. We are saying how many clusters in the clusterings from one of these sets of feasible clustering exist. What is the minimum number of clusters possible? Yeah? So for the first set, this is weakly connected, is the number of weakly connected components in the network, right? So if there are three separated weakly connected components, then 3 is the minimum number of clusters that could be obtained. For the second set of feasible clusterings, this minimum number is the number of centers. What is the center? Is the strongly connected set of units, right? The number of these centers would be the minimum number of possible clusterings. For the 3, the number of strongly connected components. For the 4, number of cliques. So this is the minimum number, but it can be more when you're searching for a result. It depends also on the data that you have. But this is the minimum number of clusters, right? For this clustering of attribute data and network data, hierarchical agglomerative algorithm can be adapted. So without this blue, this black one we saw before. Each unit is a cluster, and then we repeat. So of course, what is the dissimilarity matrix? Dissimilarity matrix is calculated according to the attribute data, right? This is D. And then we have relational matrix R, this binary relational matrix. Now we have 2 matrices here, okay? D and R. So if we have only D, then without blue, this is the hierarchical agglomerative method, the algorithm that we saw before. But when we have D and R, so that we have attribute and network data, then when we are looking for the nearest pair of clusters, the requirement is that these 2 clusters have to be related, right? Otherwise, we cannot fuse them. So it's another requirement. So the nearest pair of clusters, for example, if these 2 clusters are not connected, so they are not related according to the relation R, then we are looking for the next nearest pair of clusters till we get a connected pair, right? And then this is the same, we fuse them and so on. We determine the similarity between new cluster and the other clusters, but we are not shrinking only the matrix D here, because we are fusing 2 clusters. That means the dimension of D will be 1 dimension smaller, but we have also changed the matrix R. This is n by n matrix R. But then when we fuse 2 clusters, this will be n minus 1 by n minus 1. So how are we going to fuse? So we have to adjust also the relationships between the new cluster and all other clusters according to the clustering type. Yeah? Because we said that the feasibility is defined by this type of what type of connectedness has to be there, right? So this is quite a job to adjust the relationships. What we did. Let us take this situation here, which is general. If there are more than this ties, then so P and Q are related. P is related to Q. There is a arc between P and Q, right? And we have the third cluster here. So so it has to be this relationship here has to be. Now let us see what's going on if there is no tie between PS or QS, then anyhow there would be no tie anywhere here. But if there is a tie, and here we have, you see, there is tie between P and S going directly to S. Here from P to Q. There are different possibilities. One possibility is, I would say, there is no tie between this fused cluster and the third cluster here also. And here, this tolerance strategy means I would say, okay, let's have a tie between the fused cluster and the third one. If the R goes on the other side, like this, this is, you see, we have connection like that here. So we see, in all cases, we will say, there is a tie between S and the joint cluster PQ. If this is like this, again, there is a nice path here. In this case also, we will always have a tie between joint cluster and the third one. But if we have a tie like that, this is the situation like here, you know, like that, we say, okay, or it can be there is no tie, and these two times it would be a tie. So we call these three strategies here tolerant, because you see, we always say there is a tie. This is strict one. You know, here are all four ones. Here are only two ties here and twice not. And then in between, we call this a leader strategy. Only in this case, there is no tie. Otherwise, there is a tie. Okay. So these are three strategies that we could do, right? In this case. The nicest thing that we did is to find the compatibility of these strategies with the clustering types phi, these feasible clusterings. We proved that the tolerant strategy is compatible with phi1, weakly connected units inside a cluster. So the tolerant strategy, this one, is compatible with the first definition of feasible clusterings, which means that the units are weakly connected. The leader strategy is compatible with phi2. You remember what is phi2? One center, otherwise weakly connected units. Wonderful. So the leader strategy is compatible with this second definition of the feasible clustering. The strict strategy is compatible with phi5. You remember this trial that goes through units in a cluster, right? The hierarchical cannot be used for the strongly connected units. So you can't use the hierarchy because it's not, you can't, okay? Then there is another possibility. So if units are in both ways connected, P to Q and Q to P, and then we have the third units, there is a tie only in the case when S is connected to each of these clusters. Or there is this and there is a tie. Otherwise, there is no tie. And this one here is for the P554. You remember this is click. Okay. Now let us see an example how this works, and I think you will understand what's going on. maybe I should also say, you know, this algorithm here would give us a dendrogram. And then if you cut the dendrogram, then you get a partition. And the idea here is, according to these strategies, this adjustment of the relationship. So for instance, if you are looking clusters with one center, wherever you would cut the dendrogram, for each partition obtained from the dendrogram, there would be satisfied this condition. You know, this is, but I will show you this with an example. So let us illustrate the effect of strict leader and tolerance strategy of adjusting the relation R. So we are using maximal hierarchical clustering algorithm here. So you will have my slides, so you can also try to do it by yourself. I cannot go just step by step, but I think I will say enough that you will be able to do it. So we have 10 units here. And we would like to cluster them according to the dissimilarities, which were calculated from the attribute data and binary relation. And the data are here. These are the dissimilarities between these 10 units. These are obtained from the attribute data. And this graph we saw already before. This is my network, right? This is the dissimilarity matrix. For instance, if we are looking in this dissimilarity, here is a 1, which means that B and D are the closest units here. These are the nearest ones, right? So we will fuse first this B and D, okay? B and D, they are related. So we can fuse B and D, but then we have to, according to the definition of, or to the strategies, okay, to define if we fuse these two ones, is there a tie of this fused one to A, to C, to F, to D, to A, to all others, right? And we did according to 3 strategies. Listen, see, this is the strict one, this is the tolerant one, okay? You remember we said that the minimum number of clusters, and here is only one cluster, is weakly connected cluster. And this is weakly connected, and it is only one. Therefore, there is only one. Huh? Here we have leader. Here we said how many leaders there are, you know. So this is surely one leader because they are strongly connected. And then here is one leader, you know. And what else? There are 2 leaders. But it can be, this is the minimum value, is 2. You know, but here we have 3, because the third one, A, is just 1 unit only, right? Okay, and these are this trail. You remember how many trails? And B and D are going together first, and then they are connected to H and I, and so on. A is the only one here, it's the only one here. Here is fused somehow with others, you know, but B and D always go first together. And the dissimilarity between B and D, these are dissimilarity of fusion, you know, here is 1, you know, because he, Somebody raised hand.
Yeah, it is me.
Okay, yeah, ask.
Anushka, can you please tell on the previous slide we have this dissimilarity measures,
Yeah.
and how did we get them according to
yeah.
which?
So we had several variables, right? And we calculated the Euclidean distance between units according to those variables. Okay. So this is the similarity matrix. Maybe I should go. You see, I had that kind of a matrix. Okay. And I calculated between each pair of units Euclidean distance. Right. And I got this. Oops, where is it? Is that okay, Dasha?
Yeah. Thank you. It was just for clarification. Thank you.
Yeah. But it is better to see the result here obtained in the graph. You see, B and D are together. And then in next step, well, H and I would go together. But then both clusters would be fused again. This is strict. You remember, strict is that there should be a trail. Yeah. So here is a trail. Here is a trail. And what about if we fuse everything? It goes like this, like this, like this. So all units are covered, and each arc is only once on the path, right? These ones are, but it is interesting. This one, of course, this one you can go from here to here, for example, and then F can be joined because you can go from F to G and then to J. Okay, and the maximum is this one. So 1, 2, 3, 4 clusters, right? This is the strict strategy. Here we have the leader strategy. Again, these ones are going together, and then this one here, so so this would be center because they are strongly connected, and F is connected to one of them. These are also in the first stage only a pair of units, but then all these are then joined. But in this case, you see, here we got this is now the center, because you can go from each unit to each of them. So this would be the center, and B is connected to D, because the others are weakly connected. So in this case, this would be the center, right? So for example, this one here, so this is of course strongly connected. These are strongly connected, and then these are like this, and these ones are connected to this one, to the center. And this one is alone, is only A, because we cannot do anything else. Okay, Dasha.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, why did F change the cluster? Like in the strict, it's with J, and then in the leader, it's with H and I.
J.
Why did it change?
You mean here is F and here is not F? You mean this?
No, I mean that like F with in the same cluster with J and G in the strict.
The strict, like you remember, the strict means that there is a trial. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that the trial, it goes like this, like this, like this. Yeah.
Okay.
It has to be trial. It has to cover all units, and each arc has to be counted only once. Yeah. So
okay, thank you.
This is a very specific. This strict is quite a specific definition, but sometimes the problems can be such that you are looking that there should be a trial going through the cluster. units inside the cluster, right? And this is the tolerant one, you know, the tolerant one, there is only one cluster because the whole network is actually weakly connected, you know, and then we see how it goes. First this one, and then this one, and then goes this, and then all this together, and then this one and this one. So why, for example, these two would not go to this cluster before? Because we were also considering the dissimilarities, right? Dissimilarity are the ones that are telling us at which stage two units are clustered together, you see? Because these are the closest ones, you see? This is one, and then there would be two, and here is another two, and here is another two, but they have to be connected. For instance, D and F and D, they are connected. So then these two would go together. For example, G and J, they are also, but so they are in the same, there should, but when we fuse these two ones, then the dissimilarity change, right? But you see, H and I are here, and G and J are here, and C and E are here, and then they join. Because, you know, the dissimilarity matrix is changing because of this fusion, right? Each time there is a one dimension less of the dissimilarity matrix. So anyhow, we can see that, for example, here in this, the dissimilarities have the most impact. You know, here, the dissimilarities have the most impact. But for instance, in this and in this case, the relation, the type of connectedness really matters. You see, for example, here we have these three together. Here we don't have these three together. F is going with these two because the connectedness, the type of connectedness is different, right? It's interesting. Here is the same here. These two are also these two. These two are also these two. These two are also these two. But then you see it changes. Here we have this cluster here. Here we don't have this cluster here. You see? Yeah. Here we have this cluster here. Here we have this cluster here. And this one is out as a specific cluster. What I want to say, it really matters the type of connectedness that is required in the definition of the feasible clusterings, right? And you have to take into account both things, the dissimilarity and the relation, and, you know, both data sets. You begin with the one that you would fuse to one because of the smallest dissimilarity, but these two units have to be connected here. If not, you go to the next one, right? And then you're fusing in each step of the algorithm, you're fusing two clusters together, which means that in each step, the matrix D is for one dimension smaller, and also the graph is in each step one dimension smaller, right? And how we fuse this, for dissimilarity, it is important, you know, which method you are using. Here we were using maximum method, but we could use also VART method. And here, the fusion depends on the type of connectedness. What type of connectedness you are going to use for solving your problem, right? So there are many choices here, you know. the type of connectedness, also the method that you are using here, you know, how to fuse and correct the dissimilarity matrix. And the results can be pretty different. Okay. So is here any problem, or do you need some clarification here? There is in chat something. No, it's okay.
No, seems like not.
Yeah. I hope I was clear enough, you know. And maybe we can find also other strategies that would be compatible with some interesting definitions of feasible clustering. This is still a possible development on this. Okay. So hierarchical clustering has a problem with the size of the data, how many units we have, right? But Vlado and Andrei figured out that it is possible to obtain fast hierarchical algorithm if we would consider only those dissimilarities for the linked units, you know. For instance, we have here these are all dissimilarities. So if we would have here only the dissimilarities of pair of units, for example, F and V are not connected. So F and B, sorry, F and B, you know, these 5 here, they are not connected. So I would not consider this dissimilarity at all, right? So I would consider only those dissimilarities where the units are connected. So, and they developed an approach for hierarchical algorithm, this fast algorithm, you know, and but it was possible to use only minimum, maximum, and average methods. For example, you cannot use here VART method here for this fast algorithm. This algorithm is available in Bayek, you know, and the commands, if somebody would like to see how to use it, it is in our book. I think this is the book, Understanding Large Temporal Networks and Spatial Networks. And in this book, published in 2014 by Wiley, so there is the chapter 9, and there are written the commands how to use in Bayek. Dasha, I think that you have this book, right?
Yeah, we have this book in our in the lab.
Yeah. So if somebody would be interested in this topic, you know, you can go there, and there are written commands how to use this fast algorithm for this general type of, I mean, for this type of clustering of attribute and network data, right? Okay. Interestingly enough, that we began this topic in 1982, actually, very, very early. And in Psychometrica, 2 papers were published on this topic, one in 82 and one in 83. You know, 82 for the symmetric networks, and in the paper 83 for the directed graphs. Okay. And then somehow we came back again and again and again on this topic. But it was interesting that some other researchers picked up this problem. Why? You know, the usual this clustering of attribute and network data are actually spatial clustering of spatial units. But in this case, these spatial units, this means that you are producing a kind of regions, which means that the units, the spatial units, should be neighboring. They should have the same border, right? So we call this contiguity relation. And for the space, this contiguity relation, if a unit A is neighboring to the unit B, then also B is neighboring unit A, which means that this contiguity relation is symmetric, right? So in this case, and because this problem is very, very many times solved, how to make these regions in a country or something like that, you know, they picked up only this our methods that dealt with symmetric networks. I haven't seen yet another possible approach for non-symmetric, for general network, for directed network. Well, for the symmetric networks, so if the relation is symmetric, which means we have the non-directed network, then several algorithms were adopted, like K-means, Constanza, Modak in 20. This is pretty new thing. Mathematical programming, Lari, again an Italian, and Duke. With spatial autocorrelations, very early, Hussein and Fuchs. This Hussein was working in Austria. Quite good friend of mine. He did this in '96. And then different mixed methods, fuzzy clustering. These fuzzy clustering models are were for some time quite fashionable. Again, another Italian copy did something in 2010. Of course, also machine learning, also very fresh things, Scheme et al. From 21. So there are different approaches, and probably there are more, you know, surely there are more. So there are different methods, different algorithms, different models used to solve clustering of attributes and directed network, not undirected. That means symmetric network, only with symmetric one, you know. So this is quite interesting. So that many people pick up this for the symmetric network, but probably because of clustering of spatial units. And let us do also spatial units. Actually, Pat Dorian came across to this Joel Garreau book, The 9 Nations of North America. And he did a very qualitative study, no numbers and so on, a very narrative novel, let us say. But it's a kind of true qualitative study. And he came up that that North America is divided into 9 regions, or he called these nations: New England, Foundry, Dixie, the islands, Mex-America, Ecotopia, Empty Quarter, Breadbasket, Quebec. And he claims that these 9 nations represent the true nature of North American society. Okay, so we can look a little bit more about, so here we have USA and Quebec and Canada, right? So here would be a kind of border between Canada and USA. So Quebec, of course, is only in Canada. Then here we have New England, right? Here's also New York and so on. then the foundry. Here is Dixie. Here are islands. Here, this part is breadbasket. You know, a lot of grain and so on is here. This is empty quarter. You know, this is hard to live in this part. Okay. Then here is Ecotopia. This is actually, here is California, but here is also Canada. So California, this is breadbasket, and this is Mex America, now close to Mexico. Okay. So these are the nations that he came. There are several other books that deal with the same problem, you know, nations of wood art. This was a little bit more more historical book, and this one is a very empirical one. Our patchwork nation, you know, they put together a lot of variables and they simply clustered them, you know. So you see that you have, for instance, red here, and they are not connected, you know. Or and here, for instance, light blue is here and light blue is here, because they did not consider the relationship, this contiguity relation here, right? So many authors were dealing with this problem. What was our research problem? Can we empirically reproduce the map that was proposed by Garot using methods with clustering of attribute data and network data? Okay. So what we did, that was very tough work. So we were reading the Garot book, and when they if he would say this part is the richest part, you know, economically the most developed part, and so on. So then we were looking for variables that would measure the financial situation, as for instance GDP, or I don't know, income per capita or something like that. So we were reading this book, and for instance, he would say, and there are mostly Black people, so percentage of Black people, for example. Or he would say, this region is the region that the most educated people exist. So again, we would say the percentage of people that has university or more of education, you know. But he would also say, for instance, there it was the rapid increase in the finances. So in this case, we also took 10 years difference, and we would see what is the difference between, for instance, GDP in increase from the first point to the second time point, and so on, you know. So we were simply reading this book and trying to find variables that would be appropriate for his narrative. That would be attribute data. Network data were simply this contiguity, so this neighboring relation between and the unit was county. So here was the reproduction. Here is a mistake here. Later we corrected this. So here is the reproduction of Garot's map. You know, so for instance, this was New England. This was the foundry. This was this Dixie, Mex America, Ecotopia, empty, and breadbasket, right? So this is the map, and this and here are the counties. You know, some counties are very large, some counties are really, really small. But you have to know that this is really an empty part of the United States. So it can happen that in this large county, there are less people than, for instance, here in a very small one. So what is our regularization problem? To group territorial units, counties in our case, into regions, such that units inside the regions would be as similar as possible according to the selected variables, and these are attributes, and form contiguous parts of the territory. And this is my network. This is contiguity. And then Vlado was good enough that he found actually already done this contiguity relation. And then we were looking for these variables, and most of the variables were from census, but I will speak about variables a bit later. Here the network is symmetric, and we search for clusters with connected units. We don't speak about strongly or weakly connected units according to the contiguity relation. In the obtained dendrogram, at each cut of the dendrogram, we would obtain a partition where units are connected. Maybe I will go back here. You see, I didn't mention before, and I should. If I would cut the dendrogram here, I would obtain 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 clusters. I would obtain partition into 7 clusters, and each cluster would be, this is strict relation, would have that trial inside the cluster. If I would cut here, again, in this partition, this constraint, this trial constraint is satisfied. Wherever I cut, for instance, I don't know, if I cut here, for example, I would get a lot of clusters, and in each of them there would be one leader. If there is only one unit, of course, that unit is also leader. I could cut here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 clusters, and in each of these 5 clusters there would be one leader. They would be weakly connected with one leader, right? And this is also the case in our case here, So if I would obtain a dendrogram, and wherever I would cut, I would obtain regions, smaller regions if I go down, and if I would go up, larger regions, right? Okay, so there are 3,110 US counties that we analyzed. And we began actually with several hundreds of variables, but then we were reducing because of the multicollinearity and these kind of things. And we selected the variables for the year 2000. You have to know that Garot wrote his book. Again, Garot wrote his book in 81. So there is a time difference that we did, He published the book in 81, but probably he got his results in late 70s, right? So there is a time gap of more or less 20 years. Well, there are some exceptions because 2000 was also the what is this census, and for the difference we took 1990 to 2000, this time difference when we want to see what is the difference. The variables were about demography, age, education, poverty, race, income, labor force. Also labor force was quite important. Employment, housing, what kind of housing, crime, there is more or less crime, about lack or not the land for growing things or water. Political, unfortunately for the political, we have only which party they voted. Probably we should. So we have to say that we have not found everything that Garot somehow had in mind when he described these nations, but we were pretty close to his narrative. So for example, these are the 42 variables. For example, this 42, you know, it's percentage of change of poverty. From 95 to 2000, 5-year difference. But sometimes from 90 to 2000, change of population from 90 to 2000, you see? But otherwise, mean age, percentage of bachelor degree or higher, median household income, per capita personal income, population per square mile, percentage of Black or African American, percentage of Asian, birth rate, and so on and so on. You know, these are the 42 variables. Okay. Regionalization was obtained according to these 42 variables and the contiguity relation, okay, which is symmetric, of course. The variables were standardized and Euclidean distance was calculated between linked counties, you know, because this is very large network. I told you there were 3,110 counties. This is very large data set for the hierarchical clustering, okay? The tolerance strategy was used because this is the connected subnetwork, and the maximum agglomerative method was applied. Okay. How many you have in Russia, right? A kind of counties or smaller units.
Yeah, we have regions and then we have districts inside the regions.
And how many districts in the whole Russia?
First of all, we have Federальный округ, so this is like federal, like some large areas, and then we have inside them. So I think now we have 7 federal.
Okay, but these smaller units.
Areas. And then we have smaller. I can Google while you are talking.
You mean are there hundreds or thousands or?
I think thousands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be similar then, like county here. Okay, this is the obtained dendrogram. Okay, what can we see here? You know, some units here have very high this level of fusion, which means that they are very different ones, a kind of outliers. These units here are outliers. And we were looking a little bit who are these outliers? Capitals of the regions or something, or, you know, the county with huge campuses, you know, because this such a county that have huge campuses, university centers, are very different from the neighboring counties, you know. So these are a kind of outliers, and you will see them, you know. But otherwise, you see here would be one cluster, here maybe another one, here will be another one. This one is, there are some, maybe something. Maybe this one is another one, and then here one. Smaller the jumps, better it is, closer they are, you see? So we see several clusters here. It's not very, very clear, but if I would cut here, I would obtain regions. If I would cut here, I would obtain regions. So we cut in such a way that we took the 15 larger clusters, not 9 as Garot, but 15. Now have at least 20 counties inside, right? And all others are non-classified counties, and they are white here. You see? So for example, you see here, one county is white here. Here is another white, you know. Some white ones are a little bit larger, like here, you know, but most of the time these white ones are just inside a bigger one, you know, and these are this type of universities or centers or something like, they are outliers in the region, right? So if we are looking to this picture, so this one is pretty close to Garo. You know, this is the Next America. This is the Dixie here. Founder is also quite good. This is California, like, but it goes much more in. So this Ecotopia, Garo was saying, you know, Ecotopia is not only the coast, but goes much inside, much larger. You know, this empty quarter is becoming smaller. You know, so Ecotopia is moving into it, and so on. So you see, this is Garo. Look at this red. It's very stable, right? This green is only one part. It goes like that, the green one. This is this Foundry. Foundry is also quite a similar, this is the Foundry, yeah, quite a similar one. Okay, Makes America, this is this. Oops, his is flatter. You see, it's a bit smaller. So we see quite a lot of similarities, but of course there are also differences. You know, for these ones, for these outliers, for these white ones, you know, of course we have to make a kind of post-analysis, and we have to simply fuse them in this green space, right? This would be a problem because we don't see if that is a red one or the green one. So that will be difficult for these two ones. But for instance, for many of these white ones, we can simply, for instance, these white ones are the green ones, you know, these ones are a problem. It could be blue ones or the pink ones. So this post-analysis, but we have methods for classifying into the most similar units. For instance, discriminant analysis can be used to classify these units that are white one to the existing clusters, right? So this is post-analysis. Maybe to make some comments for this, counties that contain large cities and university cities are quite different from their neighborhood. These are the white ones, and they can be assigned to the counties by post-processing to the corresponding neighborhoods. That should be a problem. One problem can be that some variables that are mentioned in Garo book were not available, but there are not so many, actually. Then the differences between our regions and Garo regions or the nations can be also result of the changes in 20 years, of course. You know, we wanted to have a little bit fresher analysis, you know, but we could also do this analysis for those years of Garo study. Yeah. Now, maybe conclusion about clustering of attribute and network data. I claim that each clustering problem has to be properly defined. You know, you have to define clustering problem as clear as possible, not to have in mind of the existing methods, but simply try to properly define your problem. And then you search for the method that is the best for solving this problem. Specific clustering problems can be formulated by properly definition of the feasible clusterings and the criterion function, So this is the flexibility. And some things can be already done, but some things you can develop yourself, right? To solve the clustering problem that exists. Yeah. For clustering of attribute and symmetric network data, many different approaches were developed. But there is a lack of the proposed approaches for the non-symmetric binary network data. At least I have not seen them beside our approach. So here is still a niche to go on. Surely optimizational algorithms can be, so here I presented the hierarchical algorithm, adapted hierarchical algorithm, and but also other optimizational algorithms could be used. But in this case, for instance, relocation or k-means or something, the problem is how to generate random initial feasible clustering for testing the selected type of connectedness. So I think that this can be a problem, but it is solvable, I think. Yeah. Another thing is to develop approaches for clustering of attribute and valued networks, or symmetric or non-symmetric, so that you would have valued networks. In my case, I was using only for binary data, right? Network data. What about value? One possibility for doing this is to use approach that we also developed, Vlada and me, which is multi-criteria clustering problem. In this case, it could be two criteria. One criteria would be that one for attribute data, and another criterion for valued networks. That would be one possibility. Maybe I should mention also, Vlada did in the last book of 2020, our book, in the chapter, I think chapter 2 or 3, he used the approach for non-symmetric network data to analyze valued networks, and what he did, he used the values on the ties as a similarity measure, and then he binarized the network, and then he was so he didn't have actually attribute data, but the values on the arcs he put as similarity measure, right? And then the binarized network he used as non-symmetric network, right? And he was searching for the clusters and the connectivity that he was searching for was that one with the center, so that in each cluster there has to be one center, but otherwise they are weakly connected, And he was using this method for bibliometric data on network clustering. I think it is an interesting approach. So that was the analysis, a possible interesting analysis of valued networks. Okay, and here are the references. So this is our book from 2014 that I was talking about. Then this is about PAEC, and this is our clustering relation data from 2000, and then generalized block modeling, and then the last book from 2020, Advances in Network Clustering and Block Modeling. And here are our papers on, on this relational constraint or network constraint, 82, 83. And then I did something in 86. And then we were using Luca Kroneger and me. We published a paper in 2009. And this is the Garot book. Okay, and this is it. If there are some questions, I would be glad to answer.
Dear colleagues, we have a chance to ask some questions right now. Dear Anuška, thank you very much for your very interesting presentation. I wanted to ask a question about your example that you were showing to us. So there are 30 something thousand of these counties that your units that you analyzed. So I wanted to ask which tool did you use to make this analysis? Was it PAEC? So it was possible to make it in PAEC.
Yeah.
Wow.
I told you that everything is in PAEC. Actually, I think that I think here, this algorithm is available in program PAEC, and all commands for clustering with a relation constraint, we call this, is given in these pages in chapter 9. So you have all commands, how to use it.
I think it also should be available in the book on exploratory network analysis with PAEC.
I am afraid I was looking and I didn't find anything. So
okay.
Maybe, but I was asking Vlad and he also didn't know. No, I don't think it is. So unfortunately, I don't know why.
Probably it was done a little bit later when the book was already done.
Yeah, because this was not done in 96. In 96 was the beginning of PAEC. This part for clustering with relation constraints was done much later. Yeah.
But I asked because I thought that in PAEC there is some limit of the units which you can make clustering of.
But
if it works for 30,000 of units, so this is just great.
Because this is this fast algorithm where you consider only the similarities between linked units. You can't use, for instance, VART method here, but also maximum method is pretty good in this case. So this works for very large networks. That's why I was asking you about how many of these smaller territorial. You would have all data of sensors and so on these smaller territorial units, right?
Yeah. I just checked. So we have 8 or 9, according to different sources, federal districts, and then inside them we have about 90 regions, because now there are different ways how to count different territories. But originally we had 89, and then inside each region, like Moscow region, we have a set of smaller districts, which are like rayon region. I think the translation should be district, rayon. And so we, in total, we have about 2,500 of these small units. But inside them, we also have some municipal smaller units. But I didn't find yet the information on how many of them we have.
Yeah, and it is important that you know what kind of data you have for them, but probably for these 2,000 and something territorial units, you would have all kind of data, right?
Yeah, we should, of course.
For instance, you can look if according to this socioeconomical development that you have in your data, you can find these smaller regions, number of regions that you have. What is the, is that the same? Would you obtain the same regions, these smaller regions that you have? I don't know what did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can test this, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
example,
actually, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I would be extremely glad if somebody would pick up this, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And maybe as you have this book, this from 2014, look at this chapter 9, you know, and you can really, we can also help you in doing this, but of course,
Mm-hmm.
the data you have to
Should
find
be
it, and
connect.
so
Yeah,
on.
yeah, should be
Yeah,
found.
yeah, and an interesting problem, you know. So you could figure out how close you can come to those smaller number of regions if you would obtain empirical regions with this algorithm.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Great,
Probably
great.
also in
Mm-hmm.
your case, you would have these white ones, you know, because the cities, the large cities are always outliers. For instance,
Mm-hmm.
Moscow would be, or Tomsk and so on, you know, the cities would be always outliers. But no problem, you know, because then you can make post-analysis. The most important is that all other smaller units really come to a larger unit. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
larger region. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much for the idea of this research. I think it definitely should be done.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
And
Mm-hmm.
don't forget that if you have also directed networks, you know, and some data, you know, you can have variables. That means that you have characteristics of each unit and a directed network, and how to find clusters according to both data sets, you know. So also, I don't know, it is nice that you know that this exists, that you can do that, you know, and this can be also for smaller networks, you know, that would be interesting to see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Also,
Mm-hmm.
if there would be a student for master degree or something that would like to do something like that, I'm very glad to be a supervisor for such a person or something like that.
Okay, we have a set of students here now in this Zoom. So, dear colleagues, please raise your hand.
Yeah, well, it's yeah. So you know, because so if you are looking for all these things, these are the good journals. So you should have in the library all these things.
Mm-hmm.
But if somebody would, and you have the most important books, you have also in your library of ours, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody would need some more or something else, we can always try to find out and send you something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Okay, we have a comment from Dasha saying that in the USA, this could be very interesting to analyze in terms of fighting gerrymandering with elections. So
what is this gerrymandering?
It's like sorry.
Falsifications.
Gerrymandering is like when the counties are united as like one election unit, and when it's when these counties are united in a way that one party that it doesn't reflect the real political ideas of the region. So like they align 3 counties and the counties like 2 smaller counties and 1 big county, and 1 big county is like Republican and 2 smaller one are Democratic, but they're one election unit, so Republicans would win this election unit. It's like a very big problem in the USA, and they always like there are a lot of talks about how to fight this kind of unjust system.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I should think about how to do it, but it's a nice problem. Yeah. That could be something to search for. Yeah, sure. Mhm. And the data are available, probably, I assume.
Okay, great. So we came up to already two research, two possible research projects. Yes, that's really nice.
Yeah.
Okay, dear colleagues, do you have any other questions or comments, or do you want to say something or write something? Okay, if not, probably we always can contact Anuška
Sure.
by mail. So thank you very much. I think it was really fantastic presentation and very interesting. Yeah, and helpful, as Alina is writing. So I think that we will be asking some questions, how to organize it and how to make it. But I think that this is something that we should definitely try in our research.
Yeah.
So thank you once again. I think I will turn off the recording.